compliment. For that, I thank you.
What is happening now? There are homeless and hungry.
Now it's time for us to stand up for God or we'll fall to nothing.
It's time now for Radio Cayman's Talk Today. If you're ready to talk, we're willing to listen.
Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
Listening to the general public, what the public would say.
And good afternoon, Radio Cayman Nation, and a very happy Monday to you. Thank you for tuning into your station of the nation, Radio Cayman. I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. Starting off our show today, we'll be having a conversation with local environmentalist Miss Linda Clark. As always, we do welcome your stories, feedback, and questions and invite you to join the conversation. Simply dial 1-800-534-8255. That's 1-800-534-TALK or 949-8037. Or you can always WhatsApp us at 925-3261. Be back with more talk today following this very brief disclaimer.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today, the Cayman Islands' foremost listeners participation program. We ask our listeners to avoid statements or comments which are abusive, derogatory, malicious, or defamatory. Do not use any indecent language or make any statement which is false or misleading. Email talktoday@candw.ky or call 1-800-534-8255.
Courtesy of Live Communication.
Let your voice be heard.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. As always, we do welcome your stories, feedback, and questions and invite you to join our conversation. The number again is 1-800-534-8255. Before we do get underway, we would like to take a moment to extend our condolences to the family of the late Mr. John Jefferson. I had the pleasure to work with Mr. Jefferson over the past 6 years here at Radio Cayman, both in his capacity as Brother John and Chef John, a man and father of very diverse talents, with an amazing history from turtling in the Mosquito Keys in the 40s to work for 20 years with the U.S. Weather Service and Federal Aviation Administration on Swan Island. The first Caymanian to be certified as an executive chef who worked at the Galleon Beach Hotel for 6 years. A member of the Legislative Assembly for 8 years, a founder of the Wesleyan Christian Academy, pastor of the Georgetown Wesleyan Holiness Church, and of course the man behind Chef John Barbecue and Catering Service for many decades, almost twice as long as I've actually been alive. So on behalf of the entire Radio Cayman family, our sincerest condolences again to the family of Mr. John Jefferson. And without much further ado, I'd like to introduce Miss Linda Clark to our show. No stranger to Talk Today. Welcome back.
Thanks, Ray, for having me on. And I would just like to echo the condolences to the family of John Jefferson.
Thank you. Happy December to you. It's been a few
Yes,
months.
a strange year that seems to have lasted forever, but also is already in December. So we do have a lot to be thankful for this year, though, in Cayman in this time. Compared to the rest of the world. So, I am grateful to the community and the government and businesses for working together to get us in this position where I can come on the radio and be here in person and not on Skype or Zoom. So, yeah, I'm very, very grateful for that. So
Right.
I feel very blessed to be in Cayman this December.
I think many do. Just take a quick moment. I think so many, you look around at what's happening in various parts of North America and Europe, and you're absolutely right. We're very grateful. We can walk around without a mask. We can have this conversation in person. We can spend Christmas with our families here or our friends, for those who don't have families here.
And yeah, of course, there's people that have challenges. And if people have family away who are coming back, it might not be possible to quarantine for the 2 weeks and fit that in vacation time and people with students away. And there are still some very difficult decisions to make. But compared to many, many places, we are doing really well. And I would just like to talk a little bit about the tourism industry today.
Sure.
Because those workers are suffering and business owners are suffering still, despite all the benefits that the rest of the community is able to take advantage of.
Oh, absolutely.
So, did you want to start me off, or should I
just
run
jump right
with
into
what I wanted to talk about?
Just jump right in, because on that note, because you're right, there's many in the tourism industry that are suffering, even with the government stipend that's been issued, and many it's grateful to the government for their help with those stipend programs. But you're right, tourism is one of those hot button topics that has to resurface in our conversation here, because that is a livelihood of many in our communities. So
exactly. Yeah. So just to give the background, or my background for those who might not know who I am, I was actually born in Cayman and educated in the UK, so I have a kind of transatlantic accent. My bachelor's degree was in economics, and then I was a professionally qualified accountant. Well, I still am, but I'm not practicing. That was for over 10 years. I did my Paddy Dive Master when I was 21, and I recently completed a Master's in Marine Environmental Management, and I went back to the UK for that. Unfortunately, it was too hard to do that course here, which I would have loved to have done. But anyway, now I really hope to combine my accounting experience with my environmental knowledge and try to help encourage policymakers and the general public to understand that we can make decisions incorporating the true environmental, social and cultural costs of our decisions, and use data-driven and science-backed evidence to make those decisions. And that's where this is a really good time for us to look at how to reset tourism, make it manageable for those that live here, for those that are in the industry, to get the most benefit economically for it without deteriorating our quality of life and a lot of the profits going overseas. So we actually have some really good national tourism plans that have been around for a couple decades, actually,
Sure, yeah.
that have some really great policy decisions and paths to follow, which would help us, put culture, conservation and community first. And I know the government did the Road to Recovery, Road Back to 500. Is the official plan. I'm not sure if there's any updates on how that's going at the moment. I do see in the news things that seem to be going quite piecemeal about what we're doing. And obviously things are dynamic and they change. There's now the vaccines that are on the way, which changes things. But I personally think that it will be some time before we have wide enough spread of that to make a huge difference. So we still have a few months of hardship for some people and some really important decisions to make. So yes, while we have the stipend for tourism workers and it's great that it was extended, I think that we could be using that money to assist the tourism workers, but also add value to our tourism product and our human capital. So
How so?
Yeah, so we could improve the quality of our product for when we return. And we want to be the envy of, look how well Cayman has taken care of the environment during COVID-19, and the tourism workers are trained up to be world class and, certified all in CPR and first aid training and have a really good environmental knowledge, so that when they talk to their guests, the guests are wowed by the local knowledge and they learn about the starfish and they learn about the stingrays. And obviously there is a lot of knowledge of that around, but it's a bit inconsistent depending on which operators we use or who's working for who and things. So we could really hone in on those skills. And for example, the National Tourism Plan from 2019 to 2023, which we're still in, was actually published earlier this year. And approved by government, but obviously COVID-19 changed some things. But I do fundamentally think that the vision statement still is really important for us, and I really hope it doesn't change. So the vision statement in that National Tourism Plan that was approved by government says that the Cayman Islands will protect our environment, celebrate our cultural heritage, while ensuring a vibrant tourism economy that benefits the people of the Cayman Islands. And I think that's absolutely perfect. And I think that so long as we have policies and incentives that complement that vision, Cayman has a really bright future, and the young people of Cayman have a bright future. if we protect the assets for them, they will get returns on being able to run their businesses, enjoy their recreational time, have a healthy life. So we also see how COVID-19 is actually a zoological, people will debate it, but it's a zoological disease, and we have been encroaching too much on nature. So the diseases are more easily passed on. So preserving our wildlife will help protect us in the future from these very harmful diseases to both the public and the financial repercussions that it causes. And another problem that we have right now alongside COVID-19 is actually in the water, and that's the Stony coral tissue loss disease. And that is actually spreading on the North Shore. And it's a devastating disease because it impacts the reef building corals. So these are the very slow growing corals. And it is killing them within a matter of a couple of weeks to months, depending on the size of the colony of coral. So essentially the whole rock, say, of the coral will die of the same species, of the same the colony, which is the same animal. And this is really devastating because they're the reef building corals, and if this disease spreads down to the west side, our whole diving industry and recreational industry will be damaged. And
so on that question there, what causes the Stony coral disease?
That's a very good question. It started off in Florida when they were dredging for the port of Miami, and it slowly drifted around into the Caribbean, and the source of transmission is unknown in terms of it could be from boats, it could be from, say, clinging onto marine plastic and being pushed around in the currents. It could be from bilge water. They don't really know yet because it's been appearing sporadically in different locations. And just at the beginning of when we had lockdown, they started to get sightings of it here. So I really think this would be a great opportunity for government policy to invest in the tourism workers with boat operators, to work with, for example, Department of Environment, to monitor this disease and really have a fast-acting response. Just as one example, I don't think the wider community fully understands how bad this disease is spreading and killing the reef. And yes, it would be great to see collaboration between Department of Tourism and Department of Environment to be able to support the tourism workers, especially those with the boat operators that have crew and staff, and for example, the Stingray City program that they have now, where the boat operators are working alongside, I'm not sure, maybe it's Department of Tourism, I'm sorry, I'm not sure which department that was, but maybe it's the ministry, is paying boat operators to go to Stingray City and make sure that the stingrays are still coming to that area to preserve that product. So this is another extension of that type of solution that would also help. It would help the tourism workers, especially the water sports operators, understand more about the coral reefs and the importance that they play, identifying different species, because, for example, some species are more susceptible than others. So you really have to start looking at different types of corals. And I've actually really enjoyed learning about that. As devastating it is looking at the reefs dying. But I
did see a video the other day and it shows like the...
That's right. Yes, it's called sloughing off. Yes. So outside of each coral head has a thin layer of tissue. And so they're not rocks. They actually have living tissue around the outside. So they're animals. So they get stressed. They're susceptible to disease like people. This is like COVID of the sea, essentially, because the rapid rate of spread and mortality. And it's highly susceptible to some species and not others. So we can really kind of mimic that thought process of how it's spreading around the Caribbean and along our North Shore. So as the corals get stressed, the tissue is literally dying. It's like necrosis and just falling off. So there's no chance of recovery for these species. And we don't know what causes it. And it's been tested in the US because they found it in a few years ago, and they still don't really know what to do. There's lots of different strategies, but monitoring it is really key to see where it is and For example, island-wide searches could be potentially be performed by a lot of the water sports operators, and that would really help. DOE could focus on the science, and the water sports operators could focus on identification and, you know, reporting back to DOE and things like that. So,
Now I understand your comment earlier about the stipend and how it can be better used for the water sports industry. Was
in
utilizing the tourism operators right now, the boat operators, to actually go out and inspect and monitor and track what's going on.
Yeah, I'm not at all saying not to give a stipend. I'm saying, but provide work too.
Sure,
and it's a knowledge building exercise as well. Yeah. And people, if you like to be on the water, you're going to feel better about it. And also not for some people, you know, you don't want your pride to be just taking handouts. You want to do work too. So keep you busy, and you're educating yourself as well. So that's just one example.
On that note, let's call quick time out. I think I might have booked too less of time needed for this segment. Let's go to a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll be continuing our conversation with local environmentalist Miss Linda Clark. Back with more Talk Today right after this.
CG Britke would like to wish our clients, their families, our staff, and our communities a happy holiday. In this time of celebration, let us remember what this past year has taught us. That we can be in different rooms, different homes, or on different islands, yet never feel apart. Because we are here for each other and stronger together. We look forward to the new year, to serving your insurance needs, and always putting people first. Happy holidays from our CG Britke family to yours.
Christmas may be a little different this year, but it will taste as jolly good as ever with KFC. Whether it's an office party, holiday fete, or family gathering, enjoy KFC's delicious, fresh, hand-breaded chicken. The KFC Festive Feast includes 10 pieces of original recipe or spicy chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, tasty coleslaw, biscuits, and a 2-liter Pepsi. KFC's holiday catering menu includes buckets of hot wings, sweet chili wings, or chicken tenders. KFC, it's good.
Tips to stay safe this holiday season. Take the pledge. Plan a safe ride home. Offer to be a designated driver. Ride the Purple Ribbon bus. Drink responsibly. Log on to ndc.ky for bus routes.
Arrive Alive 345. Take the pledge, designate a driver, or ride the Purple Ribbon bus on New Year's Eve. This message is brought to you by the National Drug Council and Radio Cayman.
Listen to the general public.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. In case you're just tuning in, I'm Raymond Singh filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks, and pleased to have in studio Miss Linda Clark, local environmentalist, here discussing a diversity of issues. And we recently were discussing the Stony coral disease, which has been making its way around the Caribbean region. And
so people might be familiar with Lionfish Invasion. It's kind of similar to that. So the lionfish devour all of the small species. They don't have any predators here. Well, like this disease, there's no natural resilience in the reef to it. And so it kills the coral outright. So then you're not going to get spawning the next year. It will get covered in moss, and then it will just break down. And you've got loss of habitat then as well, loss of ecological biodiversity. For our tourism product, it's devastating. If we can be an area if we put a lot of investment into this, looking for research and science into addressing this disease, we could have the healthiest reefs in the Caribbean, and then pass on that knowledge. That's a really great blue economy, science-based sort of export of our resources if we could do that, for example. But yeah, I would really like to see that Department of Ministry of Tourism support the water sports operators in learning about this and joining in on Department of Environment's really. They're working really hard to understand this. But
sure. Quick question then. So for obvious reasons, the governments of the Caribbean need to jump on board to actually make this a priority. But private sector enterprises throughout the Caribbean that rely on tourism equally have a lot to lose as a result of this. Are we seeing any kind of private enterprise movement to address this?
The trouble is the private enterprise don't have any income right now. So that's the challenge. Where they're also getting the money from government. So if the stimulus package could also incorporate or even be enhanced to address this problem, like we've made big sacrifices for COVID-19, it would be an investment in our future ability to attract tourism and the resilience of our reef. Our fish grow on the reef. If we want to have fishing, we need to keep the reefs healthy. And our coastal protection is reliant on the reefs too. So once we get these big, some of these corals are hundreds of years old and they're dying in 2 weeks. It's scary. It's
very much like COVID, right?
It's like COVID, the way it spreads rapidly and the mortality for those susceptible species is high. And there was outbreaks of disease in, I think it was the late 70s. So actually it was before I was born. So some people might remember that the branching corals were really impacted by that. And so they're now very endangered. So we have the risk now of more and more species becoming critically endangered and the impact that will have on the type of fish we have on our reefs, how pretty it is to dive just aesthetically, but also all the functions it provides for us, like coastal protection,
of course,
cleaning the water, keeping the water nice and clear, and all those things too. So another action plan that they have in the National Tourism Plan that was released earlier in the year has the Cayman Islands Environmental Program for the Tourism Sector, which it was called CEPTS, and it was launched in 2008, but it was no longer active. And that to me sounds like a wonderful opportunity to revitalize that program. And the goal under the National Tourism Plan that falls under was Goal 1, which was protect, manage, and enhance cultural and natural resources. So that seems like a program that government already had considered, and I would hope would be easy to restart. And again, it takes government funding and investment anyway. So this would be a perfect time to relaunch that program, get stakeholder buy-in from the tourism operators now while they have time. They're not running like crazy doing all their trips. So they have time to have input into this, and whatever training needs to be done could be done. And in terms of customer service, safety on board, maybe we could certify every boat to certain standards. Yes, we have very minimal licensing, but we don't have any boat captain requirements. Another goal in the existing National Tourism Plan was the Blue Flag certification for beaches, which also talks about safety on the beaches and the quality of the environment on the beaches, which would again be a really great bragging right after COVID-19 to say why come to our island compared to the other islands that no one's been to for months, and say, well, we did all this great stuff. We have the Blue Flag certification program. We have the the Cayman Islands Environmental Program for the tourism sector, where all of our tourism sector are the best quality, and we could really sell that. And I know a lot of people in the tourism sector who are very motivated, and they would. I think they would really enjoy and appreciate the opportunity to get these. But again, it does need investment by government, because private sector, they're not making any money now. They don't have their own revenue. So it does take that. So there's quite a bunch of programs like that actually already in the National Tourism Plan. So Goal 4 was deliver outstanding visitor experiences, and Goal 5, develop a highly skilled tourism workforce. So these all fall perfectly within what we already had decided we needed. They approved this at the beginning of the year, and where we have the time now to help people get through this. And I'm not in the tourism sector myself, but I would really love to see more about this and love to see government supporting these workers and implementing the plans they already have. They must have already decided that these were worthwhile because they approved them earlier in the year.
Sure. Taking a quick time out there. We have one caller on the line.
Absolutely.
Good afternoon, caller. Thank you for calling Talk Today.
Hi, Ray. Hi, Linda. This is Troy Leacock. I'm the owner.
Troy.
Hi, Linda. I'm the owner of Crazy Crab Private Boat Charters. And I'm also one of the architects of the stingray feeding and interaction program that Linda was talking about. So a couple of points I'd like to make today if I've got time.
Yes,
the
please.
first thing is the stingray feeding and interaction program is being funded by government, but it was architected and being administered by the private sector. I'm kind of the lead administrator on it, and I'm really pleased to say that 2 weeks in, it's going really smoothly. We have 42 operators involved with over 150 crew members, and you know, it's a program that is literally architected, administered, and operated by all the commercial operators that have what we call wildlife interaction zone licenses. So we're out there every day, up to 3 trips a day, 67 trips a month, not only feeding but also interacting and handling the rays to basically try to do the normal things with the rays that we would do during a normal visitor season. I'm really pleased with that, and I think that's an example of where government funding, but private sector programs, so to speak, can really work hand in hand together. So whether it's, you know, other programs for the Stony coral or you know, other things that can be done, I think that's a template for that. So that's really my first point. Really to thank all the operators who are participating. Thank the government once again for the funding. We have funding for 4 months, so hopefully by the time so hopefully we'll be reopened by the time you know, the program runs out. And I'd also really encourage any corporate listeners of the show, if they'd like to be involved with donations, they can contact me at Crazy Crab, and you know, we're inviting donations to be able to expand the program, purchase more food, etc., and just be able to do more trips. So thank you for the time on that.
That's really encouraging. Thanks, Troy, for providing some direct insight into that plan.
Yeah, it's very impressive. 42 boats and that many trips a month is impressive. Thank you for your efforts on that.
Great. The other point that I'd like to make is probably in terms of sustainability and sustainable tourism. It really is a point that maybe many people don't think about, even though I know Linda certainly does, because we've had conversations on this and she mentioned it early in the show. But you know, when we think about sustainability, we tend to think about sustaining our natural resources, you know, and basically not depleting them. But I like to think in terms of, particularly in the industry of water sports and in the industry of what we call the North Sound operators, I like to think about cultural sustainability as well. You know, when I got my first boat license, which was only about 5 years ago for the Wildlife Interaction Zone, I was number 32. The most recent license that was issued was number 279, and that was issued in January of this year because a moratorium on new licenses came into place in January. So we've been under a moratorium for Wildlife Interaction Zone licenses for the whole year. What that license allows you to do is to visit Stingray City and the sandbar as a commercial operator and feed the stingrays. So you all of the commercial operators are required to have this license. So it just goes to show you that in, you know, less than 5 years, we've gone from number 32 license to 279 license. And, you know, I've heard anecdotally that in the year before January, there were over 100 licenses issued for new boats. So what we're basically getting is an industry that was traditionally Caymanian, and almost 100%, not only Caymanian owned, but also Caymanian operated. That industry is now facing a tsunami of new operators, many of whom, it could almost be argued most of whom, are actually foreign-owned boats, foreign-owned operators. And I know we can kind of dance around the Cayman, a business is 60% Caymanian-owned, but no matter how you look at it, you know, we know who is out there on the boats, we know who are operating the boats, and I think we're facing a cultural tsunami. And I think that this is a general issue that needs to be addressed in the general tourism market. You know, people come here, but our tourism product generally is not very Caymanianized, as I like to call it. Some sectors, such as taxi drivers, are, but most hotel staff, most restaurant staff are not Caymanian. And the water sports operators, the Caymanian water sports operators in the North Sound, are really now starting to talk about the need to make sure that we Caymanianize that industry, and to make sure that what is a limited industry and what is a limited market, even as we reopen, possibly for the next 2 years, to make sure that that market is protected for Caymanians and businesses that are 100% Caymanian owned. So I know, this might be a controversial topic, but I think that it's something that we need to be having a dialogue about right now before we reopen and before the moratorium is lifted, because, it's one of the most traditional Caymanian industries. It is the industry that was hit the very hardest by this closure. It was an industry that had faced a tremendous amount of restrictions, and it's an industry in which its people are suffering terrible financial losses. And I think that we need to look at that. We need to think about the cultural preservation. And as well as we think about our marine resources and preserving those, we need to think about the cultural aspects of sustainability as well. So that's my other point. Thank you guys for your time.
Troy, thank you so much for calling in.
Thanks, Troy. Great to hear from you. Yeah,
on that note, we do have to go to a commercial break, but I do want to say thank you again to Troy for calling in. 2 very valuable points that were made there in regards to sustainability, both from a environmentally and a cultural one as well. On that note, let's go to our commercial break. Back with more Talk Today right after this.
UCCI students, have you registered for classes in the spring 2021 semester? Class registration takes place until January 8th. Classes start January 11th. Spring into action. Visit ucci.edu.ky/myucci. Call 623-8224 or email admissions@ucci.edu.ky for more information.
Honey, our fridge has stopped working again. Everything in the freezer is melting. We need to get this repaired right away. I'm calling Brand Source Service.
When you need the very best appliance service, call Brand Source Service at 623-5000. Offering service and installation of all brands and models of appliances. Brand Source Service is Cayman's source for appliance parts and repairs, with qualified and experienced technicians and the island's largest stock of appliance parts. Brand Source Service will have your repair completed in a flash. So, whatever the problem is, call the experts at 623-5000. Brand Source Service, Dorsey Drive, Industrial Park. Telephone 623-5000.
If you enjoyed The Honeymoon Over, you're going to love the sequel, Fat Chats. Once again, the Harco Theater will be coming live and direct into your homes and vehicles. As the Cayman National Cultural Foundation, CNCF performs Fat Chats on Radio Cayman. You can join us right here on Radio Cayman every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Starting November the 18th until December 23rd. We will have a repeat of each week's episode airing every Saturday at 6:45 p.m. beginning on November 21st and ending on December 26th. Don't miss it.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. In case you're just tuning in, I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. And in studio now is Miss Linda Clark, local environmentalist. We've been discussing the potentially future state of tourism and how we can better approach tourism when we start looking at more wide open borders opening up and vaccines coming in to facilitate that process.
Yeah, actually allowing visitors to travel. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
In the meanwhile, I hope everyone's enjoying the local tourism market, that we can support our local vendors as much as we can, restaurants. And if you want to have a couple drinks at Run Point, maybe you could hire a boat captain to drive you or something instead of worrying about driving, having had a couple of drinks. So even in the boat. So as Troy was mentioning, which I really think is a big issue as well on such a small island with a small amount of resources, the dilution of the Caymanians benefiting from the economic opportunities that are available. And ultimately, I suspect that is due to there being too many or too low barriers to entry into the market. So it's far too easy to just set up a shop here. But that's where having the Cayman Environmental Tourism Program would be really helpful, and licensing of boat captains, not just the WIS licensing, but actually having licenses for boat captains, and increasing regulation. It sounds like more regulation, but actually it increases safety. It increases the likelihood that the customers are going to have a good experience, and to have that knowledge of local Caymanians really enhances anyone's experience. To have a guide that actually knows about Cayman and can say about growing up here and talk about their family guests absolutely love that because it feels so unique compared to somewhere else in the world. And Cayman is a very special place.
It is.
So alongside this dilution of economic benefits for tourism workers, not only in the number of operators, but in terms of the type of tourism we have. So we're all aware that we normally have over 600 cruise ships per year with 1.9 million passengers coming ashore, and we only get 20% of our revenue from those customers, compared to 80% of the revenue coming from stayover. So stayover is absolutely the most lucrative part of our tourism product and minimizes the degradation of our quality of life. So the traffic and the garbage that was created from it and all these things. Headcount isn't always the best measure of success. So actually during lockdown, there's been a few grassroots networks from around the world who've had similar have been targeted by the cruise industry to expand over the years, as we have in Cayman. So there's been bi-weekly or fortnightly meetings with people from Venice in Italy, from Sydney, Australia, from Kiel in Germany, Gold Coast, Australia, Juneau, Alaska, Monterey Bay in California, Maine and New York, Southampton, UK, Bahamas and Belize. And this group is now called the Global Cruise Activist Network. So it's cruise port residents, civil society organizations, and labor and crime victim advocates. And I'm part of these regular meetings. It's informal, it's grassroots, and we are trying to ask for no return to business as usual, especially given the health impacts of COVID being spread around the world on cruise lines. It's very concerning what they might push. And we had a few weeks ago, the Sea Dream was even a small vessel that tried to start in the Caribbean, and they had a COVID positive case that ended up spreading to 9 people, and it's too early for cruising. So I hope that the government and the Port Authority will increase our cruise ban. At the moment, it expires, I believe, on the 31st of December. It would be nice to see that extended to make sure that our community is as safe as possible until the vaccine and other travel programs are proven. And in the meantime, we can focus on our stayover market and, ensure the maximum benefit to our islands without risking COVID spread and further lockdowns and financial recessions. So, having said that, I would also like to see that the referendum is held in the May election. So we did trigger a referendum for the cruise port. We do already have 1.9 million passengers per year coming to Cayman, or normally, and the economic model just does not support the cruise dredging our natural resources and coming closer to shore and the environmental impacts of that. And again, the actual benefit that local tourism operators get from those cruise ships, it needs to be reevaluated. So it would be great for the referendum to be held at the same time as the general election. It wouldn't be the first time that a referendum's been held on the same day in Cayman, and this would really just get the answer for the public and follow the law, the constitution. We've triggered it. The law's there now. The government just has to set the date. And financially speaking, it will cost the people of the Cayman Islands less by holding it on the same date than trying to do it in a year or 2 years.
Have you gone through the process to try to have that question included in the election ballot?
I'm not involved in the organization within CPR. Was just a volunteer and everything like that. So I don't know exactly what conversations have been had. I know publicly the government has said that they don't want to do it, which I don't really understand why. It makes the most sense to just have it then. And a really interesting example of 3 referendums that just happened in Key West, another small port community that relies on tourism, and they held a referendum in Key West at the same day as the federal elections, and they voted yes to 3 referendum votes, which is preventing more than 1,500 passengers from disembarking per day, banning ships with a capacity of 1,300 or more, and giving docking priority, because they already have a dock there, to cruise lines with the best environmental and health records. So that sets an example of, in the Caribbean as well, and on the Western itinerary, of how we are not, there's a lot of communities that are not saying no to cruise. They just want it to be managed and to make sure that the benefits are shared equally between the local population and the cruise lines.
So on the Key West scenarios, you mentioned no ship with more than 1,500 capacity.
That's right.
And no more than 1,300 per day disembarking.
That's right, yes.
It's far less than where we're currently at right now, or where we were, back before.
Yes, exactly. So they used models and public discussions and consultations to get to those numbers. I wouldn't say that we need to stay the same as that, for example, but that's what their actual referendum questions were, based on their local data and their local information and the types of vessels that they would like to see there. And we do know that the smaller vessels have the higher paying passengers, and so I do think that that's a great way for Cayman to look at things too, especially with the prioritizing the best environmental and health records. Sure. I don't know how that could be a lose situation. That just sounds like best for everybody.
That's a best practice scenario, I think, going forward for many.
Yeah, so there was the Rethink cruise tourism campaign, which again is not a anti-cruise tourism. It's just saying let's have a better balance, and how we can manage the local community, the local operators getting their fair share of the rewards of this industry. And I just would like to mention, over the weekend there was the Ocean Heroes Boot Camp, which was the first virtual Caribbean Ocean Heroes Boot Camp, and I did present a little bit on that. And thanks to all the organisers and our wonderful young students who participated.
Absolutely.
It's great for Cayman again to be the host of that. Even though it was virtual, Cayman was the host of that event.
I think it's great, man. I think it's because it shows just how, because we had them on the show not too long ago.
That's right, yeah.
They're quite young, they're vibrant, they have this strong energy about them that they want to make a difference, and to see that they're leading a charge for this jurisdiction to be the forerunner is, I think,
it's their future. It really is. Like, every decision we make now is going to impact them the most. So it's really great for them to be heard and hear other options than maybe what is going on at the moment, and viable options.
And what was your presentation on?
I talked about the Global Cruise Activist Network. For example, U.S. Virgin Islands has a port that they, the cruise lines, despite the closures, they're still trying to put a port in there. Belize, they're trying to put a port in there actively now. So I just spoke about that, and how all these grassroots people from all over the world, despite COVID, we've never met in person, but we're communicating, and how to build networks. So that was great. And obviously Steph McDermott was one of the hosts, and she's been involved with the port. She did that wonderful documentary alongside some other people called Rebirth, highlighting the beauty that we have here and why people come, and the damage that the port would actually have on building the port would actually have on the Cayman Islands in the long term, and what would affect these students.
No, it was quite a bit that's been going on, and it's interesting to see now if people have more questions about the Stony coral question. How can they get in touch with you?
Well, I would actually ask them to get in touch with Department of Environment. Tammy Warrender, she is the lead on that, or Corey McCoy. And they are giving out information sessions as well. So I think I hope they could squeeze a few more in if people are interested. And it is important. It does affect all of us. So,
no, absolutely. It's a scary one as well.
Yeah.
So, that's enough. Thank you so much again for coming in. We do appreciate you taking the time, as always.
Thanks, Ray.
And Merry Christmas and all the best for the holidays. And 2021.
Yes, all the best.
All the best. On that note, we're going to go to our 1 p.m. headline news. When we come back, we'll be discussing the Legal Practitioners Bill. Back with more talk today, right after this.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
It's only 2 species that we have here on the island.
Generations present.
Your voice, your choice.
It is in the best interest of the people of these islands.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
Throughout today, the Cayman Islands national flag is being flown at half-mast at all government buildings to honor Caymanian culinary icon John Jefferson Sr., who passed away on Saturday morning at the age of 93. Flags will be flown at half-mast again this Friday, December 18th, the day before the official funeral takes place in his honor. Turning to international news now, the first COVID-19 vaccination in the United States has taken place as the country gears up for its largest ever immunization campaign. An intensive care nurse in Long Island, New York, is believed to have been the first person to be given the jab. Millions of vials of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine are being distributed, with 150 hospitals expected to receive doses on Monday. The U.S. vaccination program aims to reach 1 million people by April. A new variant of coronavirus has been found, which is growing faster in some parts of England, MPs have been told. Health Secretary Matt Hancock said at least 60 different local authorities had recorded COVID infections caused by the new variant. He said the World Health Organization had been notified and UK scientists were doing detailed studies. He said there was nothing to suggest it caused worse disease or that vaccines would no longer work. And Nevada's electors just cast their 6 votes for President-elect Joe Biden during a virtual meeting on Monday. Biden won Nevada by about 2% points, 50% to about 48%. He beat Trump by about 33,000 votes. Trump and other Republicans filed lawsuits to overturn the results, falsely claiming there was widespread fraud in Nevada, where all residents were mailed absentee ballots. The Nevada Supreme Court unanimously rejected Trump's long-shot lawsuit, and Nevada's GOP Secretary of State has not endorsed Trump's conspiracy theories about the election being rigged. Nevada has voted for the winning candidate in 10 of the last 11 presidential elections, with 2016 the only exception. Those are your latest updates here on Radio Cayman. I'm Shanda Gallego.
For the latest in news and information,
follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
your voice, your choice, your radio.
Kirk Freeport's $40,000 is back. Spend $100 on your favorite Kirk Freeport store, and you could win one of 3 $5,000 cash prizes or one of 5 $1,000 cash prizes. All purchases of $100 before noon on Christmas Eve qualify for all remaining prize draws. There will be the annual Rolex watch prize draw on January 4th and loads of other great prizes. Our small boxes give big surprises and a Christmas full of great prizes. Full details on KirkFreeport.com. Merry Christmas from everyone at Kirk Freeport.
Do you remember when 2020 was great?
I don't think it was...
2020 vision, not the year.
Right.
Make 2020 great again with Optical Outlook, the new West Bay store now open. With their designer frames and sunglasses, eye health has never looked so good. Call 746-2020 and book your eye exam today at Caymanian Village and now at Jake Scott Plaza in West Bay, offering premier eye care in Cayman for over 30 years. Come see the difference with Optical Outlook.
Rotary. We've been part of the beginnings, the then and now of the Francis Bodden Girls' Home in Bodden Town and the Bonaventure Boys' Home in the West Bay. Rotary Central, along with community partners assisting students to overcome barriers on their path of learning during this pandemic. Thousands of dollars in laptops. Support for the annual Rotary Island-wide health check and diabetes training by Rotary. The National Blood Bank, supported by Rotary since 1999. Lives saved, lives restored. Just a little of what we've done and continue to do. Rotary opens opportunities.
Attention Caymanians, the registration deadline for the 2021 elections is January 4th. Caymanians turning 18 on or before the May 26 election may register now.
Every vote will count in our May 2021 general election.
In order to vote in the 2021 elections, you must register by the 4th of January. For more information, visit elections.ky or the elections office at Baytown Office Suites opposite the Wharf Restaurant. Radio Cayman's Talk Today, the Cayman Islands' foremost listeners' participation program. We ask our listeners to avoid statements or comments which are abusive, derogatory, malicious, or defamatory. Do not use any indecent language or make any statement which is false or misleading. Email talktoday@candw.ky or call 1-800-534-8255.
Courtesy of Live Communication.
Let your voice be heard.
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. In case you're just tuning in, I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks, and pleased to have in studio now local attorney Mr. Philip Ebanks, here to discuss the Legal Practitioners Bill. Now, this has been a topic of conversation for a few decades now, not just a few weeks or even a few months. This has been an ongoing conversation with much debated on both sides, but ultimately many saying that this is something that does need to get done. The legal practitioner needs to get done.
Yes, absolutely.
It's just a matter of how and where it gets done. So, Mr. Ebanks, walk us through for our listeners the general scope of what the Legal Practitioners Bill is, for because many of us are not attorneys. So
yes,
this bill
of course. The Legal Practitioners Bill, as you've alluded to, has been a bill which has been bandied back and forth for the last 20 years. And in which there's been a lot of debate. And in fact, about 10 years ago, there was a commission that dealt with what the pros and cons were of a legal practitioner's bill. And just about that time, the bill that was then being considered was, for want of a better word, was scuttled at the last minute because it just wasn't a bill which was satisfactory. Many of the things that were proposed, including the 60-40 Caymanian partnership in law firms and things of that nature, have been a difficult, thorny issue. And as we've gone down this pathway, it really has not become an easier issue. I think part of the problem, of course, is that it seems to get pushed in the background after each individual election, and then its head rises again, so to speak, just at about election time. So we're in the 6 or 7 months leading up to election now, and here it is again. What is concerning, of course, is that it is significantly in the same sort of tenor as was previously proposed back in, I think it was 2011, 2012. And at that time, many of the things that were in the bill then have returned in the form of the bill which is now before the House, and in particular, and of particular importance to Caymanians, is the idea that we should have a 60-40 rule, which is generally a rule. I want to make it very clear. It's generally a rule for any kind of business in the island. If you are going to have a business in the island, there should be at least 60% shares and direction of that business. If you don't have that provision, then you have to go through a special process called a local control application, where you make the case that your particular field requires for some kind of deviation from that general principle. We have said for a number of years that same principle ought to be applied when it comes to partners in law firms in Cayman. It's not a new request or a new requirement or a new wish. It's been there for a while, and it seems that the powers that be can never get their head around the fact and to get a law which meets with that requirement. And now it's gone, in my view, even further down the rabbit hole, because for one thing, in the recent proposals in the legal practitioners law, there's also a proposal that would effectively offer a concession in terms of work permits for lawyers who are hired by these large international firms who are overseas. And we say simply that really makes no banks.
Mr. Banks, if I could ask you to back up just a little bit, because for our listeners at home, to make sure we're clear on what, because you just jumped from the local control application situation, but you mentioned the partners. Was that a question of wanting to see the law reflect that 60% of the partners within the firm are Cayman? Was that the comment you
That would be the
sorry, just make sure
yes.
I'm clear on what you're actually saying there.
Yes, and we think that that's obviously fair. These firms have done very, very well from practicing Cayman Islands law, and why shouldn't they make an endeavor to make sure that the people of Cayman can also benefit from the sharing of the wealth that is generated. They share millions of dollars a year in partnership, sharing and interest and so on in these firms, and in conjunction with that, and in accordance with the local controls companies law, which effectively has been around for many, many, many years, which says that Caymanians should be 60% of these companies. We say that should. There's no reason why that shouldn't go into effect.
Do you know roughly what the estimate of partners across the board in Cayman would be between Caymanian partners and expat partners? Do you know roughly what that spread would be?
I don't know exactly what it is at this point in time, but I would venture to say that if the case that is being made that's already being met, then we should, we need that empirical evidence. My instinct is, and from what I've been told and what I understand, it is not being met at this juncture. And in fact, the way that the law is now couched, it avoids that whole question of what.
How does it avoid the question right now? Of
what percentage would be Caymanian as against non-Caymanians in legal practice, and in particular as partners of these major firms. But as I said, one of the really disconcerting issues that I have observed about the current proposal is the idea that major practices under this proposal would be able to avoid work permit fees and work permit fees for practitioners who are overseas. Now, we are in a dilemma here now following COVID, where clearly a lot of local business and local businesses are having difficulties. Some of those businesses will move away. Some of those will have to give up on their overseas permit holders, and people will leave and go back to wherever they're from. And a large part of government's revenue is derived from work permits. If we've done a cursory review of what we think the impact of conceding on non-payment of work permit fees, and bearing in mind, of course, that when you talk about work permit fees for a lawyer, it's quite significant. Sure. They start from around $17,000 a year and go all the way up to $28,000-$29,000 a year.
So
it's significant.
It is. Just make sure I understand when you say conceding work permit fees, that because the conversation on work permit fees, when you mentioned that people might go back, a lot of these are the hypotheticals of they might go back and then they'll start practicing law from where they're from, and now we're not going to get the work permit fee.
Well, let me back up, because I feel that I've actually confused you. When I was speaking a few minutes ago about people going back, I was thinking about and talking about the general business community, not necessarily lawyers.
Okay. Thank you.
Because of COVID and otherwise, a lot of people may no longer need work permit people here locally, and may end up, government would effectively lose that revenue.
Sure.
And when I'm speaking of the concession, the proposed law indicates that going forward, you wouldn't pay a work permit fee for someone who was employed overseas.
Of course.
And clearly, if you do sort of a cursory mathematics of that and figure that you're talking in terms of work permit fees, which range from $17,000 all the way up to $29,000 a year or thereabouts, and you do a cursory review of what the potential loss of revenue is, you come up with about $17 million in loss revenue. And that really raises 2 points, as I would put it.
Okay.
First of all, obviously, the loss of revenue to government is clear. You know, that's money that the government doesn't have to do all of the other things that needs to be done here locally. It needs to therefore...
Is it a loss of revenue?
A concession would be a loss of revenue.
Okay.
If you collected it...
Unearned or a loss, a little bit of a different, but fair enough, okay.
Yeah. If you collected it, you wouldn't lose it.
Sure.
So it's you're conceding, so to speak, I'm not going to collect that revenue.
So is the suggestion then, just to make sure I understand, is the suggestion that if you're practicing Cayman Islands law that you should be paying that permit fee? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, yes. Under current proposals,
okay.
if you get called to the bar in Cayman, the first thing that you need to do is you need to get a work permit.
Sure.
Okay?
If you're from overseas, yes.
Right.
Correct.
So you're not allowed to be here unless you have a work permit.
Correct.
You get a work permit, and then you get called to the bar, and you pay a minor fee after that, which is about $2,000 a year, which is significant for your bar fee.
Practicing fee, correct, yes.
The major fee that you pay is a work permit fee.
Correct.
Okay. And as I was alluding, that raises a difficulty on a number of fronts. First of all, where does government move in these times to recover that loss of revenue that it potentially could have in circumstances where, like we're in now, with the COVID environment. In short, we don't think that, and I don't think that we have studied this matter carefully enough to really know where we should be going with this sort of concession at this point. But again, if you're a local, and just step back for a second and stop talking about lawyers, because people's ideas is that lawyers make tons of money anyway, so what if, But step back for a second and think about what this means to the rank and file individual on the street who has a little landscaping business or a little painting business. He's here, he's paying all his work permit fees, and he's paying pensions, health insurance. He's here contributing to the economy. How can that be fair to him? That someone who is just because they're a bigger institution and can go overseas, why shouldn't they not contribute in the same fashion to the local economy to make sure that the pension and health insurance and particularly work permit fees, very often the whole idea of work permit fee gets kind of lost, right? But if you look back at the Cayman Islands system of collection of taxes, the work permit fee is a significant way that we collect taxes.
Sure, that's a major part of our revenue system.
And you're not paying on an income-based tax on an income-based position. So if you're not contributing by payment of your fair share of work permit fees, then effectively you're not really contributing into the economy in a very meaningful way that the government can look and say, hey, that individual, they're paying their fair share here. And that's disconcerting.
Couple questions then, just to make sure because you're absolutely right. When it comes down to it, for many of our listeners, it's a scenario where this legal practitioner's bill is something that affects the attorneys and the law firms, but very little as far as the man on the street, so to speak, and how it affects them day to day. But with regards to the imposition of a work permit fee for someone who's domiciled elsewhere, and if you were so to speak, if the government were to contract a group from the States to do a study from overseas, and they were entirely based overseas, but they were doing the work for here, would you suggest that firm should have to pay a work permit fee in the same regard?
Well,
if they're just consulting,
I know we can be all over the place. We can be all over the place on this, right? But if you think about it from a very simple position, which is that the law of the Cayman Islands is one of our resources here.
Absolutely.
Cayman Islands law is a Cayman Islands resource.
A very highly regarded one, yes.
How do you allow individuals to benefit from that in a meaningful way, that they're also contributing to the economy of the Cayman Islands?
Yes.
And we simply say that in this era, to give up what we would say is approximately $17 million of revenue, which could be in government's coffers, is really ill-conceived and ought not to be happening.
So a question for, because I'm listening to Parliament last week. I believe I heard the Honourable Premier mention that there was going to be an enhanced practicing fee. Sorry, an increase in that from that $2,000. I believe, I don't know what the exact amount was of the enhanced fee.
Yes,
that offsets some of the concerns.
Well, yes. I mean, here's what they're talking about. They're saying if you're practicing overseas, you'll pay $4,000 instead of $2,000.
Sure.
Right. So there's a little enhancement there. But when you look at the counter argument that that individual, if he even paid the regular $2,000 plus the $17,000 or $18,000 worth of immigration fees, right? You would immediately see that there's, this is a special deal, a special concession, and for what reasons and to benefit who? We have to bear in mind that when you talk about the people or the institutions or the companies that will be able to take advantage of this, they're the larger international style firms, many of whom, most of whom, and I would venture to say the majority of whom will have a ton of international partners who they don't know anything about the Cayman. They don't contribute personally to anything here in Cayman. Why should we be given a concession out in these circumstances? Now, we used to concessions, right?
I use the word concession a lot. I've heard. I'm trying to question the immigration facts. We're talking about work permit fee. We're talking about immigration and someone being physically domiciled within your jurisdiction. We start talking about immigration and work permit fees. But these are individuals who are not actually. And I'm not taking it outside. I guess the question in my head is maybe changing that word from immigration fee or a work permit fee to a different kind of fee and still using, or a filing fee or some other. Is that the suggestion you're going with?
If you figure out how you're gathering the fee, and bear in mind, of course, that subverting the sort of the way that the immigration law works is more than just about the fee. When you go through the immigration law, right, and when you make an application for a work permit, there's a requirement for the board to consider whether there's Caymanians available.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
And obviously that's key and important to overall to ensuring that there's this pathway and possibility for future Caymanians to enter the field and to get into the field and to be taken in under employment of the major major practices. Obviously, if you're a Caymanian, you wouldn't be paying a work permit fee, but the process by which they are obligated to apply for work permits would require them to advertise that there's these vacancies available, and also for the work permit board to have some oversight to make sure that the large, particularly anyone really who is seeking a work permit, doesn't just go along and say, well, I'm just gonna hire somebody else anyway. So it's more than just the issue of the fee, which is significant. It's also about the process and subverting that process to make sure in a way that would allow for Caymanians not to get a fair shake, not to get even proper consideration.
So to sum up, we have one call, but I can sum up two of the concerns that you've raised thus far. Three of the concerns. One was the absence of the I guess it would be the trade and business license scenario of the local control application and the desire for the 60% Cayman partnership within the law firms. The second concern was that there's a uncollected potential revenue source coming from the fee, the work permit fees, the fee attached to the work permit fees for those who are domiciled outside of Cayman but practicing the law within the jurisdiction. And the third was that this is not necessarily a revenue scenario for the country, but a scenario where potentially Cayman attorneys would not, or particularly run the risk of not having the option of some of these positions because they would be being sent overseas without any local control oversight from what would be the work permit board.
That's correct.
So those are the three concerns. We do have one caller line. We'll come back and readdress all of those. Good afternoon, caller. Thank you for calling Talk Today.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, caller. Thank you for calling.
Okay. This situation you're all speaking about.
Yes, sir.
How many qualified lawyers do we have that are members of Parliament?
How many qualified attorneys do we have that are members of Parliament? Is that your question?
Yes.
Qualified or?
Well, I think I get what is going at. Obviously, the Premier is a practicing lawyer, and then we have Miss Juliana O'Connor Connolly, who is a practicing lawyer, and Miss Tara Rivers.
Practicing or qualified?
Yeah, qualified, and that's what he's getting at, is that these are people that have actually been called to the bar. Obviously, they're now in Parliament, so they are not necessarily practicing now, but certainly these are all qualified individuals who have been called to the bar and would be entitled at any juncture, I would to continue practice is what I'm saying.
There's a number. Yes. I don't know the exact amount of the of our members of Parliament who are qualified attorneys. But there are several in there within Parliament. Caller?
Yes. Concerning this situation, how long has this been occurring? And also, what does the Chief Justice have to say about this situation? And what does he know about it that is incorrect, that needs to be corrected?
Caller, can you elaborate on how long has this bill been debated for within the Parliament or Legislative Assembly in the past? Was that your question?
The situation you all are speaking of right now that needs to be corrected.
Yes. Okay, so on that one, this bill has been debated for going over more than 2 decades now. It's been going back, I believe the current law stems from 1969. Or there was amendment.
Yeah, it's been the law. Legal practitioners law is currently has been in effect for considerable amount of time, and as you've said, over the last 20 years or so, there's been a lot of heated debate back and forth. There's been also a commission that was done some 10 years or so ago, and many of the issues that you've heard me allude to today, in terms of the 60-40 provision, has been something that has been heatedly debated for many years. This edition of the Legal Practitioners Bill has been. I think this was first came out in about 6 to 8 months ago. So it is a recent revision of this very topic, and part of the problem is that it raises its head. It seems consistently in the year leading up to election, and it gets banded around a little bit, and then it gets forgotten for a period of time, and then it's then raised again and saying, oh, it's so urgent, we got to get it done. And then there's this push, as is being done now, to, take it through Parliament as it is, and of course, against the two very serious, I would say, competing interests. One of those competing interests is an interest that that the smaller practitioners, such as myself, continue to flag, which is that we should be looking for a fair shake for Caymanians in the firms, and the larger firms, obviously, they're quite content to leave that part of the status quo as it is, but to look for things and what I term as a concession in terms of these issues with work permits and so on, and work permit fees, and that is patently unfair. It's unnecessary, and I haven't seen any kind of a study or anything of that nature which would lead me to believe that is even something that's necessary. It's been bandied around that, we get this is some business that we would not get otherwise, and that's a good reason why we should pass the law in this state and give these concessions. But there's no study. It's just politicking, really, about to justify something which there has been no really proper study of, and that's where we are today.
All right, caller, we do have to go to our 1:30 commercial break. As far as your question about the Honorable Chief Justice, we'll try to attempt to answer that when we come back from the break. Thank you so much for calling in. On that note, we do need to go to our 1:30 break. When we come back, we'll be discussing more of the legal practitioners bill with local attorney Mr. Philip Ebanks. Back with more Talk Today right after this.
The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you. We are a not-for-profit, member-centric plan with a democratically elected volunteer board of trustees representing all sectors of the Cayman Islands economy. We have an all-in expense ratio of less than 1%, over 20,000 members, and $490 million in assets under management. We were the first multi-employer pension plan approved by the regulator in the late 1990s, and today we are still strong, secure, and are here for our employees and employers alike. If you would like to join or require further information, visit chamberpension.ky. And for information as it happens, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Email admin@pensions.ky or call 745-7630. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you.
Fidelity Bank would like to thank all essential workers. We salute your efforts and thank you for the sacrifices you've made to keep us all safe. During these challenging times we're facing, our top priority is the health and safety of the communities we serve. And while it's true that things are changing rapidly every day, one thing that will never change is our commitment to giving you the best and sound financial solutions to help you during and after the coronavirus pandemic. At Fidelity Bank, our focus will always be you. Fidelity, we're good for you.
Your Radio Cayman 6 p.m. news, Monday through Friday, is brought to you by Logic. Your life connected.
Listen to the general public.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
Welcome back to Talk Today. In case you're just tuning in, I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks, and pleased to have in studio Mr. Philip Ebanks, here discussing the complex issue of the Legal Practitioners Bill. For those who aren't fully aware of the bill and its implications, this has been a matter that's been in discussion for quite a number of years now, well, a little over 2 decades, with many on every side in agreement that we need a modern legislative framework, given how much the legal industry has changed and how much Cayman has actually prospered throughout that industry and how sophisticated that industry has become, especially for Cayman.
That's correct.
And our legal system here. So, Mr. Ebanks, the caller before the break had one of his last questions was, I'm not sure either of us are in a position to speak about it, but how much was the Honorable Chief Justice aware or invested, involved in this conversation?
What I can say about that is that there's certainly been no public knowledge of that I'm aware of that he's been specifically consulted, but one would envisage that that he has. What his response has or might have been to such a proposal is really anybody's guess. But I would say that the caller does hone in on a quite an important issue, which is that we have to bear in mind that the Chief Justice, as is the Attorney General, are both constitutional positions which have very specific functions under the law. We should also bear in mind that by convention, certainly, and from time immemorial, there's been the concept within our law and our system is that the bar ought to be, and when I say the bar, I mean the lawyer's bar ought to be independent as well of any kind of overreach by any of the other sections of society, and of the governmental sections, and that makes sense, obviously, because obviously lawyers will come in to defend individuals before the courts. They may have to also appeal decisions of courts, and then on the other hand, you will also find that the Attorney General, in some circumstances, will be leading or directing the process or prosecution or application on behalf of the government, and advising the government clearly on the issues of law. So this whole idea of independence is a thorny one. It's a troubling one, and one. For example, one of the questions that would have to be asked is that, suppose as a member of this bar of the bar, and you're prosecuted or you're fined or something of that nature by this council, then where would your first point of appeal be? I mean, where would you appeal? Would you have to appeal then, because the Chief Justice is on that? You may have to go to the Court of Appeal, and that's an unwieldy way to handle appeals, particularly appeals of first instance. In that you bear in mind that the Court of Appeal rarely hears a case within the year in which an appeal is lodged. So just think about the time factors for that type of thing. It just seems like it's a difficult, unwieldy kind of approach to deal with an appeals. I mean, we ought to be able to get to the point where we can have a substantive, proper council of people of stature who can fulfill the role of being without, it just seems to be.
So it's a situation where the lawyers are actually on the same playing field as the rest of the public now.
Yeah, well, no, we're not. No, we're not. The reason we're not is because if something happened before any of the other boards here in Cayman, say the labor appeals or immigration, they have within the system there. They have an appeals process, and then you get to Grand Court. All right. This would mean effectively that just because you're a lawyer, then you have to go to the Court of Appeal to as a first instance. What if where would you go then? You go to
wouldn't the Constitution
Privy Council after that? I mean, it's just ridiculous.
But wouldn't the Constitution put it towards the Grand Court first before the Court of Appeals?
Well, normal process is that you have courts of varying different levels. You have
so if the tribunal
a summary court. You have. If you wanted to use a tribunal type case, here's what your process would be. You'd go before the tribunal, then the appeals tribunal of that particular tribunal, and then you would go to Grand Court. So it gives.
So there's a process there.
A reasonable process, and a legitimate and relative to the issues. Appropriate, and to say that because you're a lawyer who has for whatever reason, come before a council and found wanting, I mean, we believe in the process of law and making sure that everybody has a full option to exercise their rights of appeal and to also remember justice delayed is justice denied. People, when you start talking about individuals and lawyers and doctors, we all fall into the same sort of bucket, in the sense that if you have a question raised about your ability to practice, that could destroy you in in a short period of time, right? So you need to make sure that these systems that are in place are fair, and that we are able to exercise those options and get a result.
Is the suggestion then that the current layout of the bill is not fair in that regard, with regards to the tribunal stage of addressing?
And I want to be very clear on that, right? I think that's not necessarily that's not a big practice, small practice issue. That's a general issue.
Of course, that applies to all 900 attorneys.
It's for all lawyers, and clearly, when we think of that, I think that that needs to be something that's really looked at carefully before we go forward.
So with regard, okay, so there's 4 overarching areas that we've brought up today as far as concerns with regards to the current legal practitioners bill before the Parliament right now. The tribunal was the 4th one that was raised. So with regards to, these are the concerns, obviously, given that how much has been discussed throughout the community, you're not the only one that has these 4 concerns. As far as the solutions, though, for these concerns, if we want to see this bill put into and have a modern framework actually in place that can work, to say that'll work for everyone, I think is of a utopian dream that I think is never, especially when we start talking about attorneys who make their living literally arguing and negotiating with each other on a regular basis. To find 900 that are going to come to a conclusion saying, you know what, this is the way it's going to work, I think it's a pipe dream that's never going to happen. But it can get one that fits the best fit policy for the majority.
Absolutely convinced that we can have something that makes sense, yes.
So with that said, and the 4 areas that you addressed, so what is the solution from your standpoint on how we address that? And I guess let's go back to this, go in reverse here with the tribunal elements. We just brought that up. The tribunal would be the disciplinary committee, so to speak.
I think it's gone from board to council now. Okay. And clearly there's been some evolution in the process, even while we've been it's been debated, and clearly the function. Nobody disputes that the function needs to be there. We do need to have a proper disciplinary process, and for that to be dealt with in a systematic and proper fashion. But we've got to ask the question as to whether this is the right way.
And by the right way, you mean having the Honorable Attorney General and Honorable Chief Justice sitting on that council. And that's 7 people, 9 people. How many people are on this council as the current bill laid out?
Yeah, I think there was one. I think there's oh gosh, I get lost in the numbers, but
I thought I heard 7 when I heard it.
And then there's other people. I think there's one from the government, one from the backbench, and yeah, there's a few, but
and it's I think that these 2 individuals should not be on the council. Is the thought
right? I think that it's unwieldy. I think it's unwieldy. I think they'll actually agree that it is.
I think I heard them both agree. I think I heard the Honorable Attorney General say that he was in favor of not being on the council, along with the Honorable Chief Justice.
I can't blame him, and I don't know why that's being foisted down in the way it is as a part of a bill at this juncture. You would have thought that those things would have been ironed out sometimes, before this.
No, yes, you're right.
It's not a good position.
Sure. Now, under the current regime, the current way things are operating for our listeners at home, the current setup is that there is not a council that oversees the attorneys for their conduct or whatever it might be in their behavior.
Of course.
Right now, it's the Grand Court or the Honorable Chief Justice. that hears matters
because
relating to attorneys.
Right.
Is there any other concern?
Well, what you touched on there was a very, very significant concern. I did touch on the issue of work permit fees and so on earlier, and of course, loss of revenue, unfairness to other Caymanians who are paying their fair share of way here in this country is big. But also, part and parcel with that is the whole idea of regulating lawyers who are overseas. You can see that that whole system would have to be very carefully looked at. I mean,
as far as disciplinary.
That's right.
Okay,
that's right. So let's say you get another set of international type incidents where particular Caymanese lawyers who are overseas are involved. We don't yet see any kind of clear position as to how you would even really properly regulate them beyond perhaps refusing to let them practice. And one of the
isn't that the methodology?
Well, yes and no. Okay. But if you back up for a second and you look at a local practitioner, if a local practitioner loses his bar certificate, he has to stop practicing. Exactly.
He can practice elsewhere. He can go elsewhere.
Well, yeah, but
the same philosophy applies, right?
Effectively, you have shut him down.
So why would that be any different for an international attorney?
Well, because let's say you're part of a large major firm here, and you've taken away the right for one of their attorneys to practice. Then you would envisage that within that system of actually enforcing that you would have some kind of potential position to enforce against the firm itself. What is going to stop the firm from continuing to do that act if they know that simply, well, I just release Jim Brown, who's in Timbuktu anyway. So,
but how does that not differ? How does that differ from the current setup? I guess what I'm understanding is we have to go to commercial break. Actually, let's address this when you come back from the commercial break.
Sure.
We have more time.
Sure.
Back with more talk today, right after this.
Thinking of getting a hybrid but don't know much about them? Vamped Motors has lots of great reasons why you should choose the new Toyota CHR Hybrid for a new ride. Hybrids save fuel, run cleaner, reduce CO2 emissions, and even recharge their batteries while being driven, so you don't ever have to worry about plugging them in. Plus, the CHR Hybrid is reliable, providing up to 1 million kilometers on the same battery and engine. And its sporty subcompact SUV look makes it fun as well as economical to drive. So stop by Vamped Motors to treat yourself this Christmas to a new fuel-efficient, eco-friendly Toyota CHR, starting from $31,900 while stock lasts. Happy holidays from all of us at Vamped Motors on Walkers Road. Paramount Carpet Cayman Brac pre-Christmas sale is back for 2 days only, Friday, December 18th and Saturday, 19th December. Save big with up to 50% off select carpet and tiles, wall and floor tiles as low as $10 a box, universal mats from as low as $5 a pair, and up to 15% off many more items. Paramount Carpet Cayman Brac pre-Christmas sale, Friday, December 18th from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Saturday, December 19th, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Followed by the Children's Christmas Party at Spot Bay Park from 4 to 6 p.m. Paramount Carpet Cayman Brac, located at 342 Spot Bay Road. Call 948-2665.
We do a whole lot more than just cover your floor at Paramount Carpet.
Get ready for Cayman National Dance Company's Retrospective, December 19th at the Harquail Theater. Retrospective is a versatile journey of the company's signature dances and new creations. Tickets are $25 for adults and $15 for children. Available at Audiophile, Bang & Olufsen, Radiance Dance Studio, or simply call 926-1826. Retrospective is sponsored by Burger King, CUC, ARC Directors, Vi's Closet, Big Fish, Radio Cayman, and Hurley's Media.
Don't miss Fat Chance on Radio Cayman every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. starting November 18th until December 23rd, with a repeat of each week's episode airing every Saturday at 6:45 p.m. beginning on November 21st and ending on December 26th. Fat Chance. Fat Chance is a comedy everyone can relate to. Henpecked Dexter is back with his wife Corrine and his mother-in-law who is living with the couple. The universal theme is be careful what you wish for, as you just may get it.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. In case you're just tuning in, I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks, and a very complex conversation regarding a very complex legal practitioner's bill, which has been on the discussion board for Cayman for a few decades now. Here in studio, we have Mr. Philip Ebanks, a local attorney, and discussing the implications of the bill and potentially some of the for lack of a better term, gaps that might need to be sealed a little bit is what Mr. Ebanks has been alluding to throughout this show. And before the break, we were discussing the accountability with regards to the tribunal element of the legal practitioner's bill, which holds attorneys accountable for their actions or inactions. And one of the conversation pieces that we were discussing was two parts of this conversation on the tribunal. One was that in its current format, the Honorable Attorney General and the Honorable Chief Justice are listed as sitting members on this tribunal. However, they equally have other constitutional responsibilities within their current roles. But then the other side of this conversation was on the potential absence of enough accountability on the actual law firms themselves as a result of their attorneys falling short in their practice.
Yeah, right. Well, as I was alluding when we got cut by the break, clearly having overseas attorneys practicing presents in and of itself its own unique set of difficulties for regulation. I mean, for example, if something goes, there's a complaint against a local attorney, you can go down the street and you can interview him, you can check his records. But if someone is overseas in a practice overseas, obviously, are you even allowed to go into their offices overseas and check their records? You may be confronted by another set of laws from another jurisdiction which completely thwart your efforts to properly supervise and regulate in the first place. But beyond that is the idea that assuming that we did find a lawyer who was practicing in the overseas in the international arena for one of the firms, and we were able to show or find that he had actually done something untoward which required him to be disbarred, obviously it would be a significant issue. But the question then raises its head. But what a level of accountability is the firm, and I mean when I'm the firm, the corporate entity of the practice, to what extent can you hold them accountable? And that is pretty unclear. We all can appreciate that at the end of the day, when you enforce a particular law or rule or regulation, if the individual firms are not being held somehow directly accountable for the actions of their overseas hired attorneys, then clearly there's an area there of significant concern for regulating overall, and I don't think that part has been properly thought through. I think that we're still sadly lacking in understanding exactly how this will be done. It would seem to me that we'd need a significant effort and a significant issue. And bearing in mind, of course, that if you start talking about walking into an overseas, a law practice office overseas, where something has gone wrong, you may not be able to even get into there. You may not be able to get into the door of there. So there's a lot of issues here which do not appear to have been properly traversed.
So there's obviously the gaps. What is, from your standpoint, the solution of plugging that particular gap as you see it? How do you fix that part of the tribunal scenario? What is your suggestion?
I think that in a nutshell, you would have to hold the local entity responsible in a significant way for the actions of all of its attorneys, including those who are overseas. Again, one of the things that I alluded to in the earlier part of our conversation this afternoon was that we've had this whole issue of this law looked at in great detail about 10 years ago. It seems ridiculous, really, that we would have expend tons of money and time on commissions and then not follow what the commissions are actually recommending. Maybe we need another commission again, but clearly we are in a difficult position here now as well, which the whole COVID environment and how that's impacting everything internationally, that I think that it might be timely, really, to get a proper commission and look back at this thing, particularly in the environment that we're in now, particularly when you balance some of the issues that I talked about, which is the economics of it. Is the economics of the going the way that they're proposing and giving up and conceding immigration fees because of the potential that we'll get business that we wouldn't get otherwise? Is that a more lucrative way for the economy, or should we get back to the base of where we are, which is where we say we ought to be, and make sure that we either know clearly that there's an economic benefit of going the route that is proposed, that the bill would support.
Do you think there's an economic benefit to going the route that they're going? Do you think in 20 years you could look back, if this bill were to go through and everything started from day one, this is ground zero, day one, off we go? Do you think in 20 years you could look back and go, this was a good...
Well, that's an important thing.
Not a council. I mean, Philippine banks themselves directly.
No, absolutely. It's very important thing is when we start talking about the legacy of what is going to be derived out of this thing. I think in 20 years we're going to be very, very sad. I think that our children or grandchildren are going to say, and they're going to be very saddened by the fact that those who have been in a position to do something about this thing have been so short-sighted. And I would encourage, I want to make sure that I'm very clear that I've always considered myself as being a non-political individual. I don't really go with the politics. I just try to do my job, and I try to remain in a neutral fashion. But I'm hoping that those are there now, and many of them have promised diligently that they would not turn their back on the 60-40 Cayman ownership of firms. Many of those people actually run on platforms, which is part of the reason why they actually got into there in the first place. I hope that they'll have a rethink about this thing and think about the legacy that they're setting here, and not just follow along because at this juncture, I'm sure there's a lot of people pulling on their coattails and say, come this way, come that way, come this way. But they'll seriously have a very serious and thoughtful look at this whole process and make sure that it benefits Caymanians.
We have to go to our 2 p.m. headline news. When we come back, I want to delve more. We've covered a diversity of concerns which potentially could emanate as a result of the current form of the Legal Practitioners Bill. But when we come back, I wouldn't mind delving more to your idea of these solutions to plug those gaps a little more. everyone has an opinion on the matter, and I'm sure you have yours on how to help address some of these items. Back with more Talk Today right after our 2 p.m. headline news.
Today's biggest news.
Radio Cayman.
It's only 2 species that we have here on the island.
Generations present.
Your voice, your choice.
It is in the best interest of the people of these islands.
Local, regional, international. This is Headlines from Radio Cayman's newsroom.
Today's biggest news.
Department of Environmental Health crews have collected more than 333 tons of bulk waste this year. Each year, the department clears large items from across the districts, and government says they have taken on 20 temporary workers in the NICE program to help with the massive annual project. So far, crews have cleared 40 tons of vegetation, 79 tons of scrap metal, and 214 tons of mixed household items. The bulk waste campaign ends next week on Saturday, December 19th. Turning to international news now. Some 337 students are still unaccounted for after gunmen attacked a school in northern Nigeria over the weekend, a government official told CNN on Monday. Local police said a large number of attackers riding motorbikes ambushed the all-boys government science secondary school in Kankara late Friday in a possible kidnapping for ransom attempt. The apparent kidnappers are making a demand via a teacher at school, the Director General of Media for the Governor of Nigeria's Katsina State said Monday. At least 446 students have been handed over to their parents, but they have been unable to reach scores of families to confirm the safety of students because of bad phone connectivity. A Singapore-flagged oil tanker was hit by an external source while discharging at the port of Jeddah in Saudi Arabia Monday, owner and operator Hafnia said in a statement. The incident caused an explosion and subsequent fire on board, the company said, as well as a hull damage. It remains unclear at this time what the external source was. And Google's services went down for about an hour Monday in a massive outage that prevented many people from watching YouTube videos, accessing their Google Docs, or sending email on Gmail. The outage also made Google Classrooms temporarily unavailable, preventing many students learning remotely from accessing their classes. A little after 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, most of Google's services came back online, but Gmail remains down for many. Google's most recent major outage took place in September when Google Docs went down for several hours. Those are your latest updates here on Radio Cayman. I'm Shanda Gallego.
For the latest in news and information,
follow Radio Cayman on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Download the Radio Cayman app or log on to our website, radiocayman.gov.ky.
Your voice, your choice, your radio.
Listen to the general public.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. I'm Raymond Singh, stepping in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks and having a in-depth conversation with local attorney Mr. Philip Ebanks in regards to the legal practitioners bill. Now, over the past hour, we've gone over a number of Mr. Ebanks' concerns in regards to the bill and where potentially Caymanians might lose out in the long run as a result of the bill's current format. So if you don't mind, Mr. Ebanks, I wouldn't mind going through the various items you have raised concerns and find out what your solutions are to address those. So one of them was the accountability element. Now, when I asked previously, we kind of delved off into the possible commissions having to come back and review how that tribunal operates. From your standpoint, how do you feel, honestly, that the current bill should be worded or changed to address the gaps with regards to both the Honorable Attorney General and the Honorable Chief Justice sitting on that tribunal and the addressing of holding the law firms themselves accountable for potential downfalls from their attorneys?
Well, just exactly. Clearly, the law should be clearly worded in a way that makes it very, very clear that law firms are accountable for their attorneys wherever they are, and that there's repercussions to flow if any of their attorneys that is in the practice has a difficulty or a problem, and it should extend beyond just the mere disbarring of that individual attorney. So certainly those are certainly my views. As to the CJ and the Chief Justice and the Attorney General's role on the commission, as I've indicated, those are in my view riddled with difficulties, and I would say I do support what the AG said, that he didn't particularly want to be a part of it. I imagine the Chief Justice has probably, I would think, would be equally, concerned about the whole aspect, given that they are both constitutionally, they're both positions which are installed by the Constitution. So clearly, we should be able to have a proper council or a board to deal with attorneys.
Who should sit on that board?
Well, I would think that that we could have other senior judges, retired judges in particular. People
Isn't that one of the suggestions right now?
People of that ilk, yes, could very well fill that role. What you would want to obviously always have in place is that to make sure that there's no conflict of interest between having attorneys who are currently in practice sitting on that board, because other factors might come into play there. Other difficulties, obvious. So
being judged by the enemy.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And
for the record, I would not mind sitting on that tribunal.
I'm sure you would.
There's a few attorneys that wouldn't mind it.
I'm sure that a lot of people will be licking their lips as to
absolutely
getting on that board. But the point is that there would need to be filled by people of an understanding of the institution and read, I would say, in the law and understand what they're doing. And I think that we can find those people. I don't think there's any difficulties in finding those people. The list of people who would be the type of people would be retired judges, retired lawyers, people who are no longer practicing before the bar, and other people who have a background in regulation. So there's a considerable amount of candidates there that could fill this role and fill it well.
Okay, thank you. That's a very robust answer. With regards to there was a comment made earlier on how the smaller firms might not be getting their fair shake. What did you mean by that, and how do we address that with regards to this bill? Like, how are the smaller firms being disenfranchised as a result of this? Because I didn't quite follow that one.
Well, I just wanted to just kind of make the point, and I think I was alluding to that point when I discussed the whole issue of the concessions on work permit fees. Clearly, if a local practitioner wanted to employ an overseas individual to come into the practice to work with him, immediately he's going to be confronted with a $17,000-$18,000 work permit fee.
Sure.
And then, of course, when you also look at the whole aspect of what an individual of that nature would be contributing to the economy, clearly that individual would come into the country, you'd pay work permit fees, you'd pay pension, health insurance, they'd be shopping in supermarkets and contributing generally to the economy. So there's a lot more to be gained by the country.
Sure.
But when you speak, on the other hand, of individuals who are practicing overseas and having their work permit fees, the fees for those people.
But could the small firm still hire the person overseas? Like, I guess you mentioned the comment that they're not getting a fair shake.
Well, what it is, right, of course, is that you bear in mind that when it comes to the overseas practice, the large overseas firms deal in a particular area of law. Sure. Their practice has to do with funds and capital markets and so on, and multi-jurisdictional areas of law where the local practitioner would deal in a much more isolated format, in the sense that he's practicing purely law that relates to the local population.
Correct.
You know, people like myself, we practice family law, you know, some elements of criminal law, and effectively it's called local practice because it affects things on the ground here in Cayman.
Sure. So how are they, but I'm still not quite following how they're disenfranchised. If the foreign attorney or the international attorney is going to be practicing areas that don't really impact on local law, but the local smaller firms are going to be focusing on local law, how are they disenfranchised by this bill if we're discussing two basically different industries altogether within obviously the overarching legal
Well, no, you're practicing Cayman Islands law.
You are. I don't appreciate that. But
it doesn't say that they practice only an element of Cayman Islands law.
Sure, no, I
and
understand
they practice Cayman Islands law generally.
But if in the same vein we're saying that the international attorney, if the local law firm wants to venture into the capital markets and those other industries, they're able to hire that international law firm. I guess I'm not
sure. Absolutely, and we should do so, and we should pay the work permit fees.
So it's just
it's work permit fees, number one. But secondly, the idea is that understanding that under the immigration law, there's a system there, and the system under the immigration law allows for fair dealings with the local population. In other words, you have to make you have to advertise the positions. It has to be applied for before the immigration board. You have to justify it.
Yep.
So there's that element there of overall fairness, not just to me as an individual attorney, but to the population as a whole, to make sure that we do the things that allow for Cayman Islands, people in Cayman Islands, to get a fair shake, to get a fair opportunity.
Okay, so it's not just the small firms getting. I'm still not fully grasping where the disenfranchisement happens in the small firms. As far as the individual goes, do you believe this bill in its current format is going to relegate local attorneys or Cayman attorneys unemployable? Is that a scenario that you envision happening as a result of this bill?
Yeah,
and if so, why and how?
Well, there's a good possibility as we look through this look into this position that we're in here now in the international arena. Clearly, everybody's looking to cut costs wherever they can.
Sure.
And if you can hire a foreign attorney at significantly cheaper rates and offshore that whole function, then clearly that's a very good economic reason to offshore the same job. I mean, why would you advertise that job locally even if you can find an individual over in another across the world who's able to provide the same function, perhaps smaller wages, no pension, no health insurance, no work permit fee, all right? No scrutiny of the immigration board, no requesting the immigration board or justifying before the immigration board why that individual is needed. So,
okay, so the concern then, now this opens up a whole different can of worms of concern. The concern initially was that there was a concern on the immigration permit fee, which would not be collected by and go into the government coffers. So my thought process was, my question was, you're not paying the permit fee either for a Cayman attorney. So
that's correct.
So when I asked the question, it was in relation to what's the difference? Well, how would a Cayman attorney be disenfranchised as a result of an international attorney? But you're suggesting that the international attorneys are actually a lot cheaper to actually work with.
That's number one, yeah. And then, like I said, it's just the whole aspect of ensuring fairness. If you went through...
Walk through the fairness game on this one, because both attorneys are qualified attorneys for the Cayman bar.
Let me just try and see if I can assist.
Okay, please.
Clearly, at this juncture, for you to hire anyone outside of the Cayman Islands, you have to go through a process with the immigration department. You have to justify that process. You have to justify that need. And the immigration department, even though it sometimes seems as if it's almost an automatic process up to some people, the fact of the matter is that there's a discretion there.
Absolutely.
And that discretion has to be exercised in the favor of a Caymanian. So again, we don't want to subvert that whole immigration process. Sure. And for what? Give away the fee and give away the process. It's just doesn't make sense to the Caymanian people.
So the solution then for you is to incorporate into this law something that mandates that a firm has to have a certain number of Caymanians? Is that the suggestion?
Yeah,
is that what you're suggesting?
Getting back to where we were, as I said, we've had the local company controls licensing law in place in Cayman for many, many, many years.
Yes.
And it's across all industries, practically. And that says that businesses should be 60-40 with Caymanians controlling the company. In other words, 6/10 of the directors should be Caymanians, and 60% of the shareholders should be Caymanians. Now, right now, what has happened is that over the period of years, that whole process has moved off, and what we're simply saying is that is something that should continue. That's something that should be properly installed in this law, because for reasons clearly it has not been properly followed, and we should have that installed in the law. It should be clearly installed in the law.
Okay, we do have to go to a commercial break here. I was a little, I wouldn't mind revisiting that one a little bit when we come back. Just to make sure I'm fully understanding, because we're now going back to the ownership level of the company and not necessarily the Caymanian attorney being hired. So it's two different conversations again that we're kind of juggling between. We do have one caller on the line as well. Let's go to our last commercial break. Back with more Talk Today right after this.
Kirk Freeport's $40,000 Christmas sweepstakes is back. Spend $100 on your favorite Kirk Freeport store, and you could win one of 3 $5,000 cash prizes, or one of 5 $1,000 cash prizes. All purchases of $100 before noon on Christmas Eve qualify for all remaining prize draws. There will be the annual Rolex watch prize draw on January 4th, and loads of other great prizes. Our small boxes give big surprises, and a Christmas full of great prizes. Full details on KirkFreeport.com. Merry Christmas from everyone at Kirk Freeport.
Do you remember when 2020 was great?
I don't think it was...
2020 vision, not the year.
Right.
Make 2020 great again with Optical Outlook, the new West Bay store now open. With their designer frames and sunglasses, eye health has never looked so good. Call 746-2020 and book your eye exam today at Caymanian Village and now at Jake Scott Plaza in West Bay, offering premier eye care in Cayman for over 30 years. Come see the difference with Optical Outlook.
King Sports Center takes pride in being more than just an ordinary gymnasium. For 14 years, their multi-purpose facility has been providing the community with a variety of sporting, recreational, and relaxation activities. King Sports Center has a bowling alley, lounge bar, multi-purpose rooms, powerhouse gym, rock climbing wall, bungee jumping, a 10,000 square foot rink, and so much more. For more information on the variety of services, call their friendly staff today at 946-5464 or email kings@candw.ky or visit www.kingsportscenter.com. King Sports Center, your one-stop shop for fitness, recreation, and relaxation.
Park your car this New Year's Eve and ride the Purple Ribbon Bus. It's free. Be safe and drink responsibly.
Arrive alive 345. Take the pledge, designate a driver, or ride the Purple Ribbon Bus on New Year's Eve. This message is brought to you by the National Drug Council and Radio Cayman.
Listen to the general public.
Your thoughts are just a telephone call away. 1-800-534-8255.
What the public is saying.
Let your voice be heard. And now,
Radio Cayman's Talk Today.
And welcome back to Talk Today. In case you're just tuning in for the tail end of our show, I'm Raymond Singh, filling in for Mr. Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. And in studio with me is Mr. Philip Ebanks, a local attorney, here discussing the Legal Practitioners Bill. And we've covered a lot of territory, and I thank all of our listeners for staying patient with us through the conversation, because there is a lot of moving parts to the conversation. And I do thoroughly appreciate that a lot of this conversation doesn't touch on the day-to-day lives of many of our listeners, but it does impact the overarching legal infrastructure, which does impact the Cayman people. So, Mr. Ebanks, before the break, we were quickly going through the various areas that you feel should be tweaked or adjusted somehow. But ultimately, at the end of the day, everyone across the board is pretty much on the same platform that a modern legislative framework is needed. There's no questioning that element. It's just a question of how do we ensure that the framework benefits Caymanians today and in 30 years.
Correct.
And that's ultimately what I think many are trying to get to. And like anything else, everyone has an opinion on how best to go about achieving that. Some will agree that the free market is the way to go. Some will agree that a little more control is necessary to ensure that nobody's disenfranchised. No Caymanian and no Caymanian firm is disenfranchised in the process. With regards to, just to bring our listeners back up to speed on where we're at here, one of the conversation elements was in regards to the partnership element within the firms, and that should be managed by the local control, the trade and business law. Is that correct?
Well, we're saying
what is the law that would
clearly?
Actually
I was making a comparison, or
sure. Okay, sorry,
or just indicating how it is dealt with generally for general business, and indicating that there's already provisions for 60-40 ownership of businesses, and that in fact partnerships, when you look at these firms and its overall scope, they're businesses, and that to be fair to the whole idea, which goes way back, and some people may not necessarily even today fully respect it, but it goes back to an old concept which was has been in place for a number of years, and it hasn't been changed, which is that Caymanians should be able to unless you have something that is so far off of the norm, should own 60% of the companies, and they should have effectively control
sure.
of that particular business. So we're simply saying that the legal practitioner's law should really be no different. There's no good reason for it to be different. We've even suggested that there are ways in which to fix it, which would not necessarily hurt any of the big firms.
What is that suggestion?
And what the suggestion would simply be is that you take a measurement of where they are today in relation to the particular issue of 60-40. And it may well be that some of those firms are already meeting that target. But let's say you run into a big firm that wasn't meeting that target. Then you set out a system involving a number of years so that they could reach that target, if not, in 2 or 3 years or whatever it takes, depending on how far they were from the target. But it would bring them in line with this idea that this country where that has been so good to so many people. I mean, that's what makes me passionate about Cayman, that Cayman has been so good to so many people. Do something. I think you're obligated, to do something positive for the country that has given you so much. And I think it can be done. I think that there's just got to be the will to make it happen, and it can happen.
Okay, thank you. That's so there's thank you for offering that solution there for the how to get to that 60-40 partner split there. A little micromanaging from the standpoint of the law would have to go in and figure out, if I'm understanding correctly, there would have to be some kind of board, maybe the tribunal or whoever it be, would have to go in and actually ensure that companies are actually up to that 60-40 split.
Well,
so there's a process there that needs to get.
Yeah, we have we have a board now that looks at it's a sub to the immigration board, which allows for the different companies to look at business planning board is called,
sure.
In which most of the other firms, most of the other companies have to put in a business plan
schedule
to them. And if where they're looking for work permit, you wouldn't do this unless you have work permit holders.
Sure.
But what it allows is for you as an individual business owner or as a corporate entity or whatever to look meaningfully at where you are now and how you can perhaps offer more positions so that you're showing a progress towards using, having more Caymanians employed. If you have even if you have a very particular type of business where there's not a lot of Caymanian labor and professionalism for that particular aspect available, it allows you to look meaningfully at how you progress from where you are now, and in 5 years, ideally you would see, there's 10% drop in the number of work permits in this particular area. How do you develop the local help to develop the local workforce?
Okay,
so something akin to that, or even using that same
there's a lot to chew on.
Business planning board,
a lot there. Obviously, one of the bigger concerns that you have raised and was the absence of the work permit fee as being a loss of revenue towards the government coffers, or a potential loss of revenue because it's uncollected revenues. But a lot there that has to be chewed upon. Now, to just bring up to our listeners an update on where we're at, we've had the Parliament running on our sister station Breeze. I believe Parliament is on right now. About to come on right back now on our sister station Breeze. Now, if I understand correctly, the second reading was done last week. For our listeners, to bring them to speed, what is the next process here before that bill would become law, if at all?
I don't think they've concluded the second reading yet. I think they're still in that process. Yes.
Okay.
So that's as far as I understand, that's still ongoing. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for if that's the case. Always a lot of moving parts, and I'm not always listening to Breeze while I'm on Radio Cayman. But Mr. Banks, thank you very much for the opportunity to sit down, and I know we poked this bear a lot, and we've tried to.
Yeah.
There's a lot in there.
There's a lot in there, and I'd just like to say, in my conclusion, that this is a subject which is very, very important. I think, not only to the practice, those practitioners who practice law, but to the country as a whole, and it needs to be very thoughtfully looked at before we make moves which will cause us to really have to really be disenfranchised, as this has the possibility of doing. I also wanted to just kind of point out that in the midst of all this issue is that many of the international things that are going on, and one of the very important international aspects of this is that even in the UK, there was a recent study which showed that a large number of firms will be either closing or merging this year because of the economic situation there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so that's going to displace a ton of lawyers as well. And so we need to make sure that within this microeconomic system that we have here, that we do what we need to, and we're thoughtful and careful not to open up our markets, throw our doors wide open, and all of a sudden you find that you have a ton of lawyers, but very few that are actually contributing to the local economy, and that's why part of this thing ought to involve really, before we throw our doors open, is to make sure that we have a proper study. It's been alluded to that there's business out there that we will get due to the way that this legal practitioners bill is in its current state, that we wouldn't get otherwise. And I'm not sure that is so. I haven't seen the study. I don't think there's been a study. I think it's just maybe some of the proponents for the bill saying, putting that forward as a position without there necessarily being any kind of empirical evidence in support of it one way or another. And it's those sort of things.
On this show.
If
it's not empirical, we really don't want to hear it on the show. Right. Empirical, we want to hear all about.
Right. So I mean, it needs to be thoughtfully and carefully looked at to make sure that we get the best result for not only for legal practitioners but for the Cayman Islands. This is not purely about lawyers. This is about a broader question. Again, if we're making these sorts of concessions with this industry, then who's to say which is the next industry will say, oh well, maybe the accountants are,
why can't we?
Yeah, exactly, or the doctors, let's hire people overseas and let them do.
It begs a bigger question, because when you start talking about like virtual business, which is the reality of the future.
Absolutely.
Virtual medicine is coming. I mean, that's a scenario where how do we actually start regulating where people get their medical advice from?
There's a lot. There's a lot there.
There's a lot here to chew on.
And within the framework of that is how does the government continue to provide its services?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, at the end of the day, government needs to...
It needs to be thought through. I think it's tunnel vision to just jump off, and because it's being suggested as being an option for you to go this route. It needs to be thoughtfully.
One area where we have to wrap our show up in a minute, but I think one area of concern is that we are not the only offshore jurisdiction. We're not the only jurisdiction that has a robust legal system in place. And I think one of the concerns when I look at it from a competitive edge standpoint, in this world of where so much is going virtual and so much is going borderless, if I can use that word liberally, is being ahead of the curve on that one sometimes might not be a bad scenario. Puts you in the leading seat when you start talking. But having said that, it's an open, vast ocean, right? It's an unexplored territory in many ways. So there's definitely a lot to chew on. And what I was looking at, the volume of concerns that were raised in relation to a 20-year-long conversation that's been had, definitely a lot of work has already been done. And I think I will give credit where credit is always due, in that a lot of work has been done on this bill to get to a point where there are 5-ish areas that need to get ironed out here from our conversation.
Right. Yeah. I think that probably if those issues could be dealt with in a meaningful, sound way, you'd have the possibilities of a bill certainly that I would support.
Sure.
And
and if you can get a majority of attorneys to agree on anything, I think that's a win.
Yeah.
But throw all your attorneys under the bus in one fell swoop.
Well, there we go. Thank you very much for having me.
Mr. Emacs, you've been a pleasure to talk to today, and I appreciate the wealth of information you brought to the table. Before we do wrap up our show, I do want to, again, extend our condolences to the family of the late Mr. John Jefferson. For those who didn't hear the opening of our show, I did have the pleasure to work with Mr. Jefferson for a number of years, both in his capacity as Brother John and as Chef John. A man and father of a number of diverse talents. And some of this history is astounding. Turtling in the Mosquito Keys in the 40s. I mean, we're talking in the 40s.
A good man, a real Caymanian man.
Yes,
all right.
No, absolutely.
Made from, like they said, when the ships were made of wood and the men were made of steel. It's one of them.
You're absolutely correct. And talking was always a pleasure. He's always smiling. And if I can just recite again some of his work history, because I think it's amazing. The U.S. Weather Service and Federal Aviation Administration on Swan Island for 20 years. First Caymanian to be a certified executive chef, worked at the Galleon Beach Hotel for 6 years, a member of the Legislative Assembly for 8 years. During that tenure, he helped increase the pay of civil servants. I believe was a part of the 1970s development plan for the islands back then, which is kind of going off memory of some of the work he's done. Founder of the Wesleyan Christian Academy, pastor of the Georgetown Wesleyan Holiness Church. And then Chef John. Let's not forget the fact that
absolutely
island famous Chef John, right, for many decades.
Unique barbecue.
Yes,
for sure.
No, absolutely correct. So on behalf of the entire Radio Cayman family and all of our listeners, Our sincerest condolences again to the family of Mr. John Jefferson. On that note, we do need to call it a wrap for today's show. Thank you again to all of our loyal listeners out there in Radio Cayman Nation, along with Miss Susan Watson, our guest, Miss Linda Clark, and Mr. Philip Ebanks. It has been a pleasure bringing you talk today, and on behalf of the entire Radio Cayman family, thank you for sharing your afternoon with us. I do encourage you to tune in tomorrow. We'll have Dr. Lee in the studio discussing the vaccines program and the state of affairs with regards to that. I'm Raymond Singh. God bless and have a fantastic rest of your Monday.
Shaken yet standing firm. This is Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.